Undergraduate School of Business. And we are very excited to have you here to share with you about the significant curriculum changes that we made to our undergraduate program. It was a 2-year project. We're rolling it out this past fall. We've rolled out the new curriculum, and we're doing so that's like following our first year class that came in fall 24. But we really think that the thing that we were able to accomplish, we're hopeful that you can take take some of what we did, how we did it, lessons learned to wherever your organization is within the university. If you're working, if you're a staff and you're working, you've got an office that you're running and you're wanting to make the change, we're hoping that some of the lessons that we can share will help you do that. If you're a faculty member, if you're feeling the need to really overhaul your modernizing your curriculum, that you can take from the lesson that we've learned and do some similar changes within your own department. So we'll go down and we'll just do introductions. You want to start with Jay?
Sure. Jay Simon. I'm an associate professor at Kogod in our information technology and analytics department. I'm the co-chair of the later part, as we'll go through, of these curriculum efforts. Not on the slide, but I've also been involved with AU Core for a long time. So trying to incorporate that broader perspective as well. I don't want to go on too much. I'll turn it over to Bill.
I'm Bill Bellows. I'm recently retired from AU, but taught in the School of Management and worked in the Entrepreneurship Center for about 10 years. And I've been involved in this committee prior to retirement, so I decided to stay involved until we had it finished.
Hi everyone, I'm Garima. I'm an assistant professor at Kogod in the management department. I had the privilege of teaching one of the first sort of revamped courses in the curriculum, so I'm excited to share a little bit about how that experience was.
And do you need us to use this microphone?
Oh, it's there.
And we should also thank Tommy for all of his work, who unfortunately had something come up and is not able to be here today, but he played an enormous role in all of this as well.
All right. So what our plan is today is to first we're gonna make you do a little work too. So we'll warm you up with an exercise, trying to just create a scenario for you very similar to what we were facing, and hopefully get those juices flowing so you can start to think about the change you want to make within your own part of the institution. So we'll take you through a quick exercise, and then we'll just give you a quick overview of basically where we were, what we did, where we ended up, and then in the second part of the presentation to really take you through what we did, how we did it, why we did it, what we learned. And then in the third part of this session, we'll take you back to an exercise, and again, really start to take you through some activities that you can do to start to think about, how can I make change within my area of the institution? What should I be thinking about? Where should I start? And then we'll leave some time for questions at the end, if that sounds all right. Okay, so hand it over to Bill.
Okay, so I have the enviable task of getting all of you to talk to each other. But that's how we go. So we'll try to put you in a little bit of a situation that we encountered at the beginning, which is where do you start? How do you define problem? And then you'll see later we use design thinking as a methodology throughout. So we hope that by doing this, you get an opportunity to maybe experience some of that. So we're going to ask you to maybe from this group over and this group just get together, and we're going to ask you to assume this little simulated situation. Your dean has asked you to assess the status of the core curriculum for your program or department. And this is a shorter list. We had a much longer list, but to make it a little bit easier to deal with in a short period of time, here are 4 issues that come up, right? Communication skills gap with students, changing workforce demands for the students, overwhelmed students, not having enough time, not having enough flexibility, and outdated topics and sites. So we're going to ask you to discuss those in your group of 4. Take about 5 minutes, trying to prioritize the issue, come up with the one that you think would be the most driving factor that you could use to convince your dean and everyone else in your department or your school that it's time to make a change. Okay? So if we could get you to cluster up and talk, if anybody would prepare you sticky notes,
So welcome to you.
Yeah, we've got some nice table
Sitting here.
to
just if you want to go back and use whiteboards, one caution, some of the markers should not be used on a whiteboard. So that's why there's sticky notes there. Right? So that's probably the easiest thing would be to have you come back here.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Oh, hi. You can join all this. Yeah, sure. Well, I will probably not explain it to
We're asking you to assess the four and come up with the one that you think is the most compelling factor. No,
Toronto.
relive that TV. Relive old times.
come on, we have two equal groups, so you can join whichever one you like.
Get it by the day.
I have a lot of feedback.
Anyway, I'll be with
Those in tons of banks, and that's what you because the files all the proof. I was glad that I was and why that's actually there. Oh, yeah, like
that. There's that's the
I would say out of that. It's up.
one. I'm just making.
I could go that all your life, you might forgo. Online program.
What are
I'm like graduate for.
up on the board?
Now we have to decide. We sync up that audio settings. How we work.
It was to Taylor at program of the department, which say claims for issues they would brought false and make and stop and vote. I did my chat. I work at home for the party. I worked in Missouri, Pinton, so Clifton. I used to be actually a student. I'm doing more than my undergrad and master's of the garage, so people I was, it should have been guys and just
Go all this stuff in the true off stick that was it to give you up like that's good. I did.
I am, but I've been in my habit, or I've changed it. I break the voice.
Just to make sure that on for you right or even sooner, some place. I mean,
I won't say no.
We're going to ask you to beat us in about 5 minutes. So creativity comes from compression. So work hard.
What are some person that is that stuff? Yeah, so, yeah. This without from your huge size. So even or same as those out in workforce demands both at the CO and me the faculty a lot. They change the way I was looking out COVID for how they're out. So that I was like this thing that our dating it's super like the college. Like well because there's actually need a little flash your hand
you get posting.
it's me so I get that. So they're
That's the part was good. Yeah,
yeah, that's just
Sarah board.
no, should get. And I will get the things. I know the rest of it were mine, so that is, I mean, not too demanding. That's not sorry, but I'm sorry. Yeah, doing work, having these changing needs. I didn't want at the same time, so as everybody else, right? And so I think, I need professors needs knowledge and try to respond to a deal. I love that. I switch over separating our common teacher and this was there. So we come on to session one by any but then I see that was that's a professor and he managed to have a summer both the boarding out if we were like we should this well but also I one where again like we are putting on to break works and see that to what how you need to get from the here and so red wars about honestly actually a character generation say right it's for two one what you share you learn is interviewed what it is for we're gonna right the night so we're gonna learn it's like totally wasn't church on this
To like to what?
top of this platoon of the long
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's so that's
and
Yeah, like sounds it will be described as
please forward and and best that
like but I think it's like
chose. Oh, you're right. It's a little more because that's 5 years now. It's just got it. Top of the Apple, test smartphone. That's what they want you to. I cut him in. Just every day, but rock every month.
I mean, those are all you up your sheet. You want to sell them that.
You want to so rack up with
Self
socially.
I don't think any of us are what it's speaking.
There though, be the chugging shedding with all you to match the serum. Oh, no, shut up. That's all.
Okay, that's just so.
Like that. You bought and said those. Do you deserve? Are you listening?
Yeah,
You deserve. It's clear. You don't need. I'm staying on them, so they got to say, "Where up the bike?" Yes. Like a little.
tiny it's in
Which is down drugs and still some unused and Freddie. You have to go out and get sleep. Freddie, I'm not kind of like for work in military.
I think.
let's I'll go yeah what's up I'll put it and I'll some of that I feel like if
A great child.
what they were at the spirit
Did a indeed is very and then he'll separate one of our it might have won us late last year and see someone like it
and easier like with years joy
but people just like it. So when I set this up for you, I just laugh.
it's actually sure
I never used.
and then because of between there people are kind to either to without even well man to hear with the nothing over like all and then you say that
Such some associations to several county states
Well, I hear going to imagine you could have
We
let's miss it. I mean, cost of the team back for saying that. But I'm not able to come out in the each reality. That's changed in that.
we're talking might be a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's long failure and then get complete. Different so what just that king friend. I can't be at them. Yeah, okay. She might be sounds. Yeah, I don't. Just go ahead and yes. When you develop things, yeah, if it's still wrong way, so if they're already picture it where he's up to the right, feel no thirsty, have it stay the
Choice color. What did other?
and then position is the both senders. And yeah, yeah. I was like more so and I saw because and yeah, yes, the back and proms. So I go out yeah, so I clean the sham wall to and I send up AI by it and let's grab about all this whole sweet something on AM and it's a kind of picture in it. But that's ton of other shit. Yeah, since they are you, that's I'm thirsty over out. I'm rabbit high. There's called the guy who explains when you're like, there's only has like every has to button you down for this that leads you telling how you can part of stuff till I think it matter using my fights. I think the time.
I mean, we had
Yeah, buddy.
using them like the beginning.
She's taking the of steam. I mean, again,
So she knew us.
for that way, they're actually good.
It's
That's what's up with like,
well, I just meant like if we just speak loudly and clearly right now.
thanks for this timing. Well, I think they end up beneficially.
Us.
Yeah,
Hey, Bill.
They're asking if they just speak really loud and clearly. Do they sign? Because we got them a new one, but they don't.
Yes.
I need still. Yeah, that's a.
But if it helps,
This and yeah, so historically connected to restrictions, like for editing publishing or what.
Yeah.
They'll stand on the edge. Oh my God, I have just so like I get down. It doesn't.
right, it'll just be.
Because they have a different video, right? And a different downcast. I do some right account. Is there the therapy's all in here?
Oh, that's right.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's the state.
Even my site.
It's good.
And he's a sound guy. Seems.
Okay, so
One of the
okay, I'll let them.
yeah, it's like that. He's right. But again, he's like, nah, they got that thing over.
Oh, yeah.
We finished. 2 more minutes.
So the thought we can show it. Good. We'll make you wait till your next set. So that
We did it.
it'll learn the shampoo part.
Yeah, I was there.
It's quite worthy, right? Like, but
Yeah, that's the but the other.
oh, they're gonna edit. They're gonna edit it all together, and that thing picks up sound too. So the sound of we.
These 4 50.
So sure, use it like an oven.
I mean, it's easier for or Eddie.
They said the battery burn.
So things about that people that be all but he just
Edit that.
they were the only question like investment.
Yeah, basically, wow, a 2-minute warning.
Oh, okay.
That then look up at 6 foot web and had things on. I agree. I think it does kind of touch everything too. Because I feel like we're more out building too.
1 minute left.
So then they'll go through the laundry center. He said, yeah, I was doing, I may still work like that was very similar to college. You were every,
And
I just get that inside of here and do something and go so I here and I
IT.
the my memory is for 5 years. Has like last a frequent. But
so
I know I played here to get
29 is I teach our MSL all the time, and I'm actually to test.
Well, no, I think so. It's true. You know, when you're feeling easy years, you and I got to know about. And that kind of work with the living people all the time. How excited. Okay, for Quinn.
Okay, keep this in mind because at the end, if we have time, we're going to go back to it. I know this is a meaty thing to do and it requires a lot more discussion. We did it mainly so you could get just a sense and get engaged into some of the thought processes we were going through at the very beginning. I'm going to turn it over to Casey now, and she's going to give us sort of a summary of how we got into this thing.
Right. So the types of conversations you're having, and we'll follow up at the end to learn more about what you discussed. That's where we were. Essentially, we were in a situation where it had been over 20 years since we had modernized our core, really done much of it. A story I like to share is I'm actually an AU alum. And when I look at my old transcript, it is very similar in terms of our core business courses to what our students were currently taking. And so, coming out of COVID, we, again, I'll explain all that later, but we had a core that just really needed some updating and been a long time. It's 44 credits or was 44 credits, which for our students, we learned was a lot on top of what they have to do for AU core, plus their requirements for their major. What was happening and what we were learning is that they maybe had room for 2 or 3 electives. And that, that's not what you go to college to do, right? You think you're going to explore, and if you knew you'd only really get 3 classes you get to explore, and everything else is going to be a requirement. Really, it was hindering a lot of our students from minoring in things, double specializing in things, maybe even studying abroad. So we really wanted to take a look at that. And our old core also, students could do kind of spread out over their whole 4 years. And if you think about a core curriculum, that's the foundation, right? Like that's where they do their foundational learning, and then they move on to their majors. And so the way it had worked out is students could get it done early, or they could kind of just take it senior, a lot of it their senior year, even sometimes after they walked. And it just didn't feel like it was working. And so our hypotheses that we have on the slide, just we were hearing from students, they didn't really understand why they were learning the things we were teaching, like why they're important. They were feeling overwhelmed again because of the requirements, because there was some confusion and some outdated topics that it really didn't understand the relevance of them. This soft skills gap, power skills gap, where we were hearing, even before we did all our research, from employers that were saying, we really would love to have stronger writing skills, presentation skills, communication skills coming out of generally business school students. They were also, we just knew we needed to kind of update it, infuse. The world is changing very quickly. There are very interesting topics in business that we were exploring in electives and the majors, but we really wanted to find a way to introduce those into the core too, and make our core flexible in a way that we can constantly infuse new information, modern information, and current business practices into them. And so the result of kind of the old core was this like a disconnect with employers. They weren't really, they were doing more on the job training than we wanted them to. With some of our students, it was creating a competitive disadvantage for students where when they were learning things that just weren't current anymore, it wasn't helping them in interviews. And, some of the things that if you all are looking to do this, you might face is some faculty resistance to change. I will say coming out of COVID, we had a lot of good momentum, wanted to get things done. Our faculty knew that the world of business is changing. We needed to prepare our students differently. So we had some good momentum coming out there, and we had we had a new dean, we had good leadership. So timing was very good for us. So we took advantage of that as well. But we were, our charge is essentially from our dean was make this better. Start from scratch. And that's what we did. We started with basically a blank slate. So it wasn't just like trimming around the edges. We knew we had to make wholesale change. And so that means we really had to think about how are we going to modernize our core? How are we going to make it smaller so the footprint is smaller so our students have more flexibility? How are we going to restructure this thing? All while aligning with what our majors need, our specializations need. And when we talk about the business core, in the business school, all of our business school students take the same core classes, regardless of their major. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of what we changed. So it was a journey. And so the work that we're going to primarily focus on was about 2 years. But even before then, coming out of COVID, we really started to lay the groundwork in understanding what we needed to do. And I'm going to hand it over to Bill because he led that effort.
Thanks, Casey. So I won't dwell on statistics, but I think we're all fairly familiar that higher education is probably not the most popular industry in the world these days. It's getting flack from all sides. Students are paying more. I think NYU is about $100,000 now to go there per year. Enrollment is shrinking. We have a whole new demographic of students coming in, and students are leaving with significant debt. So we have to be, as a service industry, we have to be able to serve the needs of both our students and the employers who are going to eventually hire them. And then locally, from the standpoint of competition, our rankings were not where we wanted them to be. And we felt that our product is really our curriculum. So what can we control? What can't we control? The first thing was, let's look at what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, and how are we preparing students, and control what we could control. And so that's what led this effort. Did we go to the next one?
Sorry. So after talking to this group of universities and about 7 or 8 others, we had a number of findings which we'll share with you in just a couple of minutes. The good news is that they all feel the same pressures. The challenge is that, in a lot of cases, their rankings are significantly higher. And our job is obviously, even though no one in this room ever believes in rankings and probably no one in the university ever pays attention to rankings, we felt we ought to take a little look at that. So with the foresight of our senior associate dean, Parthaban David, who toward the end of COVID said, we need to reimagine the way Kogod works and acts and thinks. And we asked him for parameters, and he gave us none. He said, this is an open book. We don't want to constrain you. We want you to think and be creative and bring as many different minds and thoughts and ideas into the process. So as we step back from that, we said, well, what methodology enables us to do that? And that's where we decided to bring in faculty, staff from across the school. And as you see this whole presentation, you'll see the way we got to where we did was through collaboration across departments with staff to be able to get a complete 360-degree understanding, focus first on what's the student experience and then working backwards to how we execute that student experience. And this is the first group. You'll see several others. All in all, I think our number was over 35 different people participated in this from different departments and programs, including Karan, who is here and participated in several of the exercises. So we spent probably the better part of a year brainstorming, working in subcommittees, interviewing probably close to 300 different people, surveying students. We talked to employers, we talked to alumni, we talked to students' parents, we talked to faculty, and we talked to employers to get this 360-degree picture. And we came up with 4 really key areas that we felt led us to where we need to go in the next phase of this project. One was connection. We need to make students feel more connected to Kogod. When you're a marketing major and all you do is take marketing, you may not know anybody in accounting, and that's a missed opportunity. The second was knowledge. We wanted to make our learning experience more rigorous. The third was preparation, and this comes down to an issue that's sort of evolving over the last couple of years, which is the professionalism of students when they go out and interview, when they go out and meet prospective employers or even guest speakers in our classes. How do they present themselves as professional young people? And the last one was relevance, right? How do we prepare students for not only today's workplace, but knowing the number of jobs and how they change by the time students graduate? How do we prepare them for the jobs of the future? But what our curriculum focused on primarily was on this purple block here of knowledge. And so we, getting a slide behind. And so we looked at these 3 pillars, right? How do we create this more rigorous student learning experience? How do we develop the students' professional readiness? And how do we prepare students to work in key industries? And we did this. This was sort of our first step. After we completed this vast amount of research, we had to narrow it down to one question, which is what design thinking does. It drives us to answer an open-ended question. And our question was, how might we create a nimbler core course curriculum to improve the value of the Kogod student learning experience? And I said it earlier, and I'll reemphasize it. The 2 things that were so critical to this was, one, making sure the students were the very first thing we focused on, and everything else cascaded back from student experience. And the second thing was collaboration, to make sure that this was an exercise and a project that spanned across Kogod. And those 2 things, I think, were the key to success in an area of change management that is not always very easy to achieve. And here in the back one. I'll go brief. I don't know how many of you have ever been involved in design thinking. Megan, I know you have, because you and I were in a panel together. And so this is this is borrowed from Stanford, which is Jay's alma mater, so maybe I'm not stealing it. But it says you approach a problem across 3 areas of evolution. The first is, how do you inspire yourself
to make change. And the way to do that is to have a deeper understanding of the problem. And so that's why we went out and we surveyed 300, 400 people. That's why we had you stand at the whiteboards and start to think a little bit about understanding the problem. And once you do that, you start to gain inspiration by learning what are the things that people are struggling with. What are the things that students are looking to do that they can't do? What are the things that faculty are frustrated? What are the things that our staff sees that they're not able to enact? And by gathering all that together, we start to move toward a phase of ideation where we define the problem using that how might we question I mentioned to you, and using our understanding and empathy, particularly again for the students, to clearly define the problem and then start the process of ideation, which is a little bit of what you did here, which is, okay, now that we've defined the problem, how do we start to creatively brainstorm ideas? And if you don't do that with empathy, then you're defining it through your own perspective. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for an empathetic understanding of the people who are affected so that we can make change that makes their world and their lives a little bit better. Then you get to the hard part, right? Then you start the engineering part. How do we develop a prototype to test this? Which we went through several prototypes that Casey will go through in a few minutes. And then how do we measure and refine the solution before we launch it out into the real world? And so in a lot of ways, this isn't that far off from the scientific method, right? You have a hypothesis, you test it through experiments. Our experiments were interviews. How do we go out and talk to people? What do they think? What do they have to say? And then how do you decide your go, no-go decisions based on those experiments?
So to do this work, again, we had the Reimagining Kogod project that came out of COVID. We learned about what we needed to do, Bill described. And then this knowledge section is where the curriculum piece we really dove in on. We got a group of so we've got both a mix of tenured faculty, term faculty, and key staff, student-facing staff, as part of the committee to really start to think about and build out what we need to do. And then you'll see we did a separate group that did the prototyping. So this is kind of the what do we really need to do group. And I think as you all are thinking about maybe making change within your part of the university, this collaboration and a good mix of folks within your office or within your department, not just tenured faculty, make sure you got the term folks in there. We also made sure to have very senior, but also very involved faculty. These are faculty that have taught a lot of classes. They've been around for a long time. They have a lot of credibility within our school. And so it was a really strong committee from that point. So it wasn't just people who needed service. It was people who already had more service they could handle, and we needed them to do a little more because that's who we really needed to make this project work. And so, again, this was a long project in the way you can see we started this research back in December 2022, and that needed to happen in order to get to run where we needed to go, which is implementation in fall 24. And so our the secondary research, we spent a ton of time, and I will stress multiple times that research piece, learning from what your stakeholders want, and the committee just being the people telling everyone what the stakeholders wants is very key to success in a curriculum redesign. And so we did interviews, we did surveys, we were working over winter break and doing all kinds of work around this research for the curriculum. We figured out what the committee met a lot. Again, even over winter break, we had subcommittees that were working, each assigned a different stakeholder and working through their stakeholder group. Processes our results. Then we started to come up with solutions. And we were around April 23 is when we came up with general solutions. We were all talking very high level in April 23. Actually, no, sorry, that was more like January 23. It's very high level. We presented our research to our faculty and staff just to say, this is what we found, to get everyone on board with we need to move forward and really try to fix this. We even, within our faculty council, you remember this, we held a vote about moving forward just because it was going to be a lot of work and we needed a vote of confidence from our faculty. And we had about 75%, I think it was, vote of confidence, which is, we'll take it. just to say, like, we need to make sure the majority of our community is on board to move forward and do all this work, and the real hard work started in January 23. And then Jay and I will take you through phase 2, but real quick, just on the research that we did, understanding who your primary stakeholders are is really important. So first and foremost, what we did. We identified 6 stakeholder groups. So we said we need to talk to our alumni. We need to talk to, for us, core course coordinators. So each of our core classes, we've got multiple sections, sometimes 10 sections of each core class. It's run by a primary faculty member because it's really important to us that all of our sections are pretty lockstep. So the learning experience for a student doesn't vary based on which professor they have for a class. So we use the same book. We use the same syllabus. We have, we work pretty lockstep. So we have a primary faculty member that runs each of our core courses. Employers were a key stakeholder for us. Our staff, our student-facing staff, like they see the results of what our students are learning many times in just their interactions with students. And so they were important. Our faculty, of course, were important to talk to, and then parents of students. So you can see we went through between student surveys and interviews, we had a lot, I think it was over 300 touch points with our stakeholders to really learn what we needed to do, learn what our problems were, and so we could start to figure out how to fix it. We also spent a good amount of time talking with other universities, seeing what they were doing. We learned that, some have made some big change, but change is hard and a lot haven't. And so because we've made this big change, now we're kind of ahead of the curve, but because change is hard. But here's a list of the schools that we talked to. We also did a lot of secondary research as well. And what we learned from our stakeholders, and I think wherever you sit within the university, if you're near curriculum, you would probably learn something similar about your curriculum. For us, it was too siloed. Students don't understand why they are learning what they're learning and how anything relates. And in business, particularly, it's so integrated. You can't just be a marketing person and not know about numbers. And so, but the students weren't learning that way. And so we needed to change how we were teaching business to them. The curriculum being just too constraining, like I said before, it was 44 credits. They weren't able to add a specialization. They weren't able to minor. Some couldn't study abroad because of all the constraints of our curriculum, in addition to the core and their major requirements. And then, like I said before, the biggest piece of feedback, and I think you will hear the same from if you're in a STEM field, if you're in even literature, like you talk to an employer that one of your students go to, and they will say, the soft skills are the most important thing. That's what I want. Teach them that, please. Just please focus on that. And don't just do like a separate elective that's on professionalism and communication, like build it in. And so you'll see that's what we did. So to the prototyping part of the process, Jay, I'm going to hand it over to you. We got a different committee together, and he's going to tell you all about it.
Thanks. Let's go. Thanks, Casey. So yeah, once we learned all of that valuable information from our stakeholders, it came time to actually sit down and start putting something together. And we, again, have another group of people who are involved in this. And again, they're people who span all of our departments, all different areas, come with different perspectives, backgrounds, and everything. I will also add, this is a fantastic group of people. If you ever get a chance to work with any of them, definitely do it. So this was our charge. We knew that we needed to add integration, flexibility, and preparedness. We had shared those findings with all of our faculty and other stakeholders as well. So making sure to keep everybody in the loop throughout this entire process. We didn't ever want to have anyone feel like they were blindsided by anything that we were building. All right. So as we sat down to get to work on this, our driving goal was the one that you saw before that Bill talked about with regard to design thinking. We also had some more specific objectives now coming from the stakeholder research. So making sure that we hit those 3 pillars of integration, flexibility, and preparedness. One thing we discovered early on as we started working through possible ways of doing this is that we wanted to move toward a more cohorted approach. One of the challenges with our old core was that students could just take largely whatever core courses they wanted whenever they wanted. A little glib, there's still some prereq constraints and all of that. But it's not very structured. So we wanted to create a little bit more of a set pathway and timing for when all of these courses happen. But also wanted to find a way to make sure that we were making their experience flexible. And you'll see in a few minutes how we resolve those two things. And as Casey mentioned earlier, it was very important to us to start with a blank slate when we did this. We did not just take our old core and figure out, oh, we're going to add this, we're going to remove this. We didn't want to be too anchored on what we were doing before. We wanted to sit down and say, what do we think a good core business curriculum should look like? So we had some things in our favor at the time and some other challenges. But as Casey alluded to, we had a dean who was extremely supportive and enthusiastic about this, a senior associate dean who was enthusiastic and supportive about this. And I think I can say confidently this would not have happened without them. And for the most part, our faculty were on board. I mean, they were in agreement that we needed to update the core, that we should make changes and some improvements. And looking at the stakeholder results, I don't think there was a lot of objection to that. The challenge, though, comes when you have to move from this general high-level idea of changing a curriculum to more specific things. When you say this is the set of courses that we're going to have, then you run into some objections. So, like that pithy quote on the left suggests. And it is so helpful in this situation to have all of that stakeholder research to fall back on. Because when you hear something like that, as members of this committee, we can say, look, this isn't us telling you this is what we think should happen with the core. This is just overwhelmingly what we're hearing from all of our stakeholders across the board. There were these specific things we needed to address, right? But whether at the individual level or a group level, whether department or faculty who work in the same area, it's very hard not to view this through the lens of how is this big change going to affect my stuff, the classes that I teach and the material that I'm invested in. I mean, understandably, there are people who dedicate their careers to that. So, of course, they think it's vital. So between that and just the general inertia in organizations, just making change hard in general, we had to proceed with plenty of discussion and diplomacy to make sure that this was going to be successful. Right. So this committee went through quite a bit of iteration on different possible structures, layouts, what timings, what should happen when. And our initial framework that we created, that we were confident enough to share with people and get feedback on, looked something like this. It was in the first year giving students more general interdisciplinary sorts of concepts, tools, techniques that we felt were important, but that were not really confined to one specific discipline for the most part. That is to provide a good context for some of the courses that they'd take later. And then in the second year to offer some of the more traditional kinds of courses, a finance course, a marketing course that might live a little bit more cleanly within a department. And both within the first year and within the second year and across semesters and years, to make sure that there is integration between these courses, that your traditional finance course in the second year can directly connect back to things that were covered in the first year, whether concepts or specific cases or examples or activities, so that this doesn't feel quite as silent. It also involved fewer credits than our old core. And that doesn't mean that majoring in something at Kogod requires fewer credits now. It means that the individual majors and specializations have more flexibility about what they want students to do in those majors and specializations. All right, which gets at the flexibility piece of what our stakeholders want. Right. So now that we have a structure in place that we're willing to share a little bit more broadly, we had to figure out how to move from a framework, a set of things that we'd like to do, to actually getting this thing fully built out and approved and ready to implement. We did that several different prongs. Once we had an initial draft of a curriculum, we went back to our stakeholders and made sure that it was doing the things that they actually wanted us to do. We need to continually get feedback on this and make sure we're moving in the right direction. And for the most part, that process went well. I think met mostly enthusiastic approval. Where we met maybe less enthusiastic approval was with some of our stakeholders, some of our, department level stakeholders, where it was a few issues were raised, but it was important to us to have this discussion with individual departments at their department meetings, where a committee member would present what we were proposing, have some discussion, hear their feedback, what they liked, what they didn't like. Just for us procedurally, we can pass curriculum changes even if a department is opposed to it, but we did not want to do that. We thought that would create problems later on, and at least at that large block level, we wanted to have some degree of consensus if we wanted this to succeed in the long run. All right, so there was some give and take there, and making adjustments to make sure departments were on board. One thing that was very helpful is some of those first year topics that I showed a couple slides ago, because they don't live within a specific department, they can be taught by faculty from different departments. That's really helpful because departments often have these concerns about gaining or losing credits, making sure they have somewhere to put their faculty. So that's a nice tool to have in your toolbox if you're doing something like this that spans departments. We also, our entire faculty meet a couple times every semester. And for several of those meetings in a row, we were giving them updates on our current status, what our current proposal looks like, what things we still have to resolve. Again, making sure that we're not ever blindsiding anybody. We wanted to make sure that our faculty and all of our stakeholders really understood what we were proposing, what this thing was going to look like as it evolved and started taking shape. In terms of actual approval, the formal approval process, the first one for us is we have this committee called EPC that does thorough assessments of any changes to courses or programs, that they do a deeper dive on making sure that what we're doing is rigorous and makes sense. So we were actively engaged in making sure that we were talking to the chair of that committee, giving them what they needed when they needed it. Turns out that they didn't want us to just dump 14 course proposals or 12 course proposals on their lap all at once. So our first step was to give them syllabi for the first year courses, since those were the ones that were a little more different from what we were doing before. So we were working with the faculty in each department, across departments, who were experts in each of those areas, just making sure that we had something substantive in place as we got moving on this. All right. I'm going to pass it back to Casey now to show you what we came up with.
All right. So here's a kind of sketch. I'm going to stand up, take you through it, of what we came up with. So we have our old core on this side. As you remember, it's 44 credits. Students can take it, over the course of their 4 years if they like. And you can see like the course numbers. We've got different departments that kind of felt like this core was their home. And the new core, we got rid of, like we said, we started with a blank slate. All new course numbers, all new course titles, all new courses. We thought it was really important to give a KSB designation to all of our core classes, so it didn't signal that this is only a marketing class, only an accounting class. And like Jay was saying, you can have faculty teach these 100 and 200 level classes really from any department, but then also that this is signaling that this is core business learning. When you go into your accounting classes, your marketing classes, that's for your major, but the core learning happens here and it's for everyone. And so that number designation was an important signal for us. And then what I want to show here is, like Jay mentioned, we wanted to take more of a cohorted approach. So all of our first year students in their first semester take these 3 classes, all of them. In their second semester, they all take these 3 classes. Third, they do these 3, and then finish up in their 4th semester. So they'll be done with their core with the exception of their senior capstone at the end of their sophomore year. We think this approach, it gives us a lot to work with. One, when the students are completely done with their core by the end of the sophomore year, they are well positioned to launch into their major. And faculty who are teaching major courses can go deeper because they know the students have a good understanding of all of business, not just maybe they took a finance class before maybe they've taken marketing. They know what they've taken. So that's going to be really helpful. We've had a lot of fun, and Garima is going to talk more about it, but we have rolled out the new core in this past semester. And so the first 3 classes we've run, and we're going to run the next 3 this coming spring. But integration was really important. Like I mentioned, we were too siloed before. And so we have overlapping projects between these 3 classes where in purpose of business, we'll use the example where they do a new product launch. The students come up with a new product and they do a presentation at the end of the semester to a angel investor about their product and why it should be invested in. They do a lot of practice for that in their business professionalism and communication class. And so again, we have like these overlapping projects where they get to just kind of understand like why they're taking what they're taking and how our classes are connected. And they get it again done in 2 years. So by the end of their sophomore year, they'll be done. And for us, like with looking at taking business in at any other institution, usually they start junior year. You have to apply to the business school. So this is really revolutionary, for lack of a better word. We're getting a lot of prospective students that are very interested in this new model because we have students that are saying, I want to take business as soon as possible. I don't want to wait till junior year. We'll say, you can come here and take 6 classes your first year that you're here. And what I also wanted to point out in this global strategy class, we have inserted a mini capstone that the students will do at the end of the last 5 weeks of the semester that culminates everything that they've learned in their first year. So it's a mini version of what they'll do their senior year after they've finished their core and their major classes. Jay, anything else to point out on that? Did I cover it? Okay. So we are very excited about this. We, like I said, we've rolled it out here this fall. We really feel we've gone back to our stakeholders, showed them what we've done and said, we listened. Tell us what you think. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback. What we've also done in our classes is we are, like I mentioned, we needed to modernize our curriculum. We have infused real key topics that employers said your students need to know. AI is infused into our core curriculum. Sustainability is infused into our core curriculum, and professionalism is infused into our core curriculum. And so and it's more integrated, it's more interdisciplinary, and it's more flexible for our students. We've gone, we're at 38, we wanted 36, but we had to, we had a give and take. It was like pushing a bill through Congress, getting this thing done. So we wanted to do more, but 38, so we saved 6 credits for our students. And so, but that does help them now add a specialization, add a minor, it gives them a little more flexibility to do what they wanted to, what they hoped to do when they got here, which is to explore. So we have seen an increase in our enrollment. Our incoming first year class is larger than it's ever been. And a lot of our students are saying, because I'm excited about this new curriculum and some of the other stuff you're doing in Kogod, we're hopeful with the cohorted approach, retention will be better too, because we've got students that are in 3 classes together. They're not all in the same 3 classes, but they're all taking, if you're first year, first semester students, you're all enrolled in the same classes. We're noticing that our students seem much more connected than they have before. And so we're hoping to get, just again, like it's been a good, we've rolled it out. We have lessons learned. We're constantly changing it. Our core faculty are talking all the time about what's working and what's not, but we've been really happy with the rollout thus far. In terms of how, so I mentioned, we're in it, we're done. And Jay had mentioned it's the implementation process that we went through last year. It was lengthy. And so for those of you who think you might be interested in doing some kind of similar change to your curriculum, just know it takes about a year just to get it through the process. Because like Jay mentioned, we had to get department approval, our EPC approval, then faculty council approval. And then I don't know, for those of you who may not be familiar with how the full curriculum process works, then every single school has to approve it. Then the provost office have to approve it. Faculty Senate has to approve it. And Michael, I'm sure there's other people I'm missing too. But it's a very lengthy process. And with each stage, we had to make sure that the people that were looking at our proposal knew what it was about, because the way the system actually works is it goes through like one class at a time. It doesn't present the full project. And so we needed to make sure everyone saw like these changes you're seeing coming out of Kogod is part of a larger project, even though the way the system works, you're just seeing really class by class. So just give yourself a year to get it done. Don't let that stop you. But, change is hard, but we're really happy we made this change and took the hits that we did to get there, because we're really happy with how it's come out. So Jay's going to talk you through a little bit more about what we've done. One thing I'll start off on the first one though. To make it successful, we wanted to make sure that because we've done this big curriculum change, for those of you who are around when we went from like the Gen Ed curriculum to the AU core curriculum, that's similar to that, because now we're running 2 different curriculum, but we had to stay in really close coordination with our AU admissions team so we could properly market, so they could properly go out to high schools around the world and market our curriculum. And also staying close with academic advising just so they can be working with students. There's some external coordination that Jay is going to tell you about, along with some of you other things.
All right, I'm just jumping in for these like 4 bullet points here. But it's also very important if you're going through a curriculum revamp, understand that it doesn't happen in a vacuum. The Kogod students are AU students. They're here for a quality liberal arts education that this university offers. So whatever we did had to fit into that. All right, and that involves like several different balls to keep juggling in the air. But I want to highlight a couple of them. Making sure that what we're doing is consistent with what they're doing through AU Core. So for instance, we front-loaded our curriculum quite a bit. Well, there are a lot of first-year AU Core requirements. So that definitely puts some constraints on how much we can do when. I don't want to frame this as a constraints thing. There are also good opportunities involved here. So I'm on the AU Core Quantitative Literacy Subcommittee. See at least 1 or 2 people who I know through that role here. That requirement involves 2 courses, a foundational Q1 course taught in math stat, and a higher level Q2 course that's supposed to be within the student's discipline. Frankly, the way our new core handles that Q2 requirement is just better than the way our old core was doing it. It's better aligned. I won't go into the weeds, but it's better aligned with the actual purpose and spirit of the AU core requirement. Speaking of QL requirements, we're also very grateful to our colleagues in math stat. I see Jeff's here. So we've been coordinating with several faculty in math stat regarding the Q1 business stats course that Kogod students take, making sure that it fits neatly into the new structure that we have. So we're looking forward to seeing that take shape as well. All right, Kogod's very big on coordination, as Casey mentioned earlier. In both our old core and our new core, every core course has a faculty coordinator, just responsible for consistency, updating materials, etc. But in addition to that, we are also going to put a school-level committee in place that's going to oversee coordination across the entire core. So making sure that those connections, the integrations across courses are maintained over time. So it's very, very important to us to make sure that we don't fall back into silos. Right? That's a big part of the reason we did this is to not do it that way anymore. And we want to make sure that it stays that way in the long term. All right. Well, we've already rolled this out. The first year students have been through the first semester of this new core. So I'm going to now hand it back to Casey for summary of what we've learned from this.
Yeah, and so a lot of it we've talked about already, so I'll go through this pretty quickly. But, like I mentioned before, I think the reason we were successful because people didn't say, oh, this committee is telling me what I need to do. It was we were telling everyone else what our stakeholders were saying and what the change that we needed to make. Our curriculum, like I mentioned before, we had good support from the ground up. We focused on our students. The students were saying we need to make change, and so we listened. And also, it wasn't just while we had dean level support, it wasn't just like the dean says we have to do this, so let's just do it. It was student experience needs to be better at Kogod, and the world is changing. Let's get excited and make this change. We involved, like Jay had mentioned too, we were in constant communication with our faculty and staff stakeholders about where we were on every stage of the process, and also just checking in with our other stakeholders, employers, alumni, things like that too, as we moved along, which I think was really important to get their constant feedback and support for what we were doing. And like I mentioned before, when I showed you the different faculty we had involved, these were faculty that really have influence in Kogod, and whatever their department is, they've done a lot. And so if, Jay or I or whoever, like we were the co-chairs for the implementation piece, if we couldn't be in every room, we had good committee members that could say all the right things and speak to what we were doing for us in their corners of Kogod. Faculty governance requires consensus. And so, like I mentioned before, we wanted to do a little more. We wanted to make it 36. We had to settle on 38 because we got to get everyone to vote for it. Okay. And so we did a lot of talking and back and forth and listening to our colleagues who were maybe not thrilled about some of the changes that we were suggesting and telling us why we learned and we listened and we made some change, which I think gave us some more credibility. And Michael Geezy. I have to give Michael Geezy and his team a lot of thanks and praise and support. We were in constant communication with them along the way. He and his team are a deep, deep well of knowledge around regulations and curriculum. And I think they really helped us make sure we crafted our curriculum in a way, the timing, the curricular process, and then our prereqs and how it all related, like really working closely with them was key for us. And then, like we had mentioned before, there's a lot of timelines and approvals. We basically said we want to roll this out fall 25 and backed into what we needed to do, which was start deep research in December 22. So that was really important to understanding what the timelines are. So for those of you who might be thinking of doing something similar, hopefully some of these lessons learned are helpful. So we also wanted to make sure you get a chance to hear about what the new curriculum is like. So Garima is here. She teaches our Purpose of Business class, which is one of the first classes that we rolled out in the fall. So she's going to tell you more about her experience.
Because of their hard work, I had the privilege of teaching the first revamped course called Purpose of Business. It got revamped from Intro to Business to Purpose for Business. And this is literally the first semester, first year. If I teach an 8 a.m. class, literally their first college class. So it's quite a hoot. I think, Caitlin, were you in my class? Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. So as Casey was mentioning, it got updated to highlight two key features. One was sort of this idea of sustainability. Kogod really believes in, sort of Megan's here too. So I'm hoping for us to have more of a collaboration, but we're already doing this, kind of really bringing in sustainability into the course, talking about artificial intelligence. Kogod has been at the front runner of artificial intelligence and integrating it on all of our KSP courses. So what the students could see is how we are walking our talk. So when our leadership, our social media, everything talks about these two things, they could kind of come into the classroom, and when we talk about sustainability and AI and other things, they could really see that we really mean what we are saying. They could leverage the variety of opportunities that are available in Kogod. So for example, related to sustainability, we have these Game Changers and Sustainability series, which is literally CEO from Marriott will come and talk to us about sustainability issues. So they could join those conversations and then come back to the class and we could talk about it. So it was really sort of, coming together, what's happening outside the classroom and what we'll be doing inside the classroom. the one thing that I was most struck about was this night and day in their professionalism and communication. And Quran is here, and she was a partner in crime, really led this KSP 112 sort of one credit course, right? So Casey showed to you there are 3 classes, 111, which I'm teaching, 112 that Quran designed and a lot of other faculty members taught, and then another 113. So what was really impressive was this really lockstep kind of unfolding of 111 and 112. So for example, if I would give them an assignment around analyze this industry, write a memo around it, in Quran's course, they're talking about giving and receiving peer feedback. So they actually took the draft of their assignment in my class, and they would go to KSP 112 and use that as the object of experiential exercise and giving and receiving feedback, and in turn actually improve their draft. So that was really, when I received those drafts, I was like, who wrote this? Like, what is going on? And then in KSP 112, they would talk about professionalism, such as situational awareness and showing up on time, writing emails in a certain way. And then I could reinforce that in my class and other KSP 111 class. The instructors were doing the same and talking about, okay, how do you show up in a classroom as you would show up in a board meeting? How would you write to your professor as you would write to your CEO? And so back and forth, we could reinforce this message, concepts in one, application in the other, concepts in the other, application in the why. So I would just sort of end with this really, kind of a winning quote from one of our students. And we were just going around like this at the end of the course, talking about what did they learn. And he says, I speak for most of us when I say that we now really know how to write a business memo. We know how to communicate the ideas that we've sort of learned in this course. So that I thought was quite offensive.
Thank you. So I'm going to wrap up this quickly so we have a little time left for the exercise we wanted to leave you with. I've got copies of this if anyone's interested, but we've gotten a little press for the work that we've done. And so Poets and Quants is publication for business schools that we all rely on really heavily. And so they actually profiled our new curriculum, and we've got the article here that we can share on, but really just took everyone through some of the highlights that the big takeaways for us that we're most proud of. Like I said before, we feel our curriculum is much more integrated, much more flexible, and it's infused with content employers say is important: AI, professionalism, and sustainability. And that's kind of the overall framework of what we've done within our core. And I think now with all the changes that we've made, our students are much better prepared to launch into their careers, into their majors than they ever were before. So with that, I appreciate your time. We're going to take you through we're going to make it work a little bit longer because we get you for 10 more minutes, right? 10 more minutes. We will leave time at the end for questions if you've got them.
Thanks. Please. Okay, so we're going to go back into our groups. And what we're going to do is basically take the priority that you chose as a group before. It's the same exercise, so we're just laddering on top of that. And we want you to turn the priority that you chose into a how might we question. Okay? We use how might we questions because they presume we don't know the answer. They presume that no one is an authority and that we're going to work together and collaborate to answer that question. So, for example, how might we create more room for electives, experiential learning, and emerging trends? The reason this is important because this simple question guided 90% of what we did through the rest of the process. So we're going to have you do that. If you want to go back and use the sticky notes, again, be careful not to write on those boards with the wrong marker. What we'd like you to do is, what are the top 2 or 3 ideas that come out of your ideas? So you can brainstorm them, put them up there, and then rank them if you like. Okay, we'll give you about 5 minutes to do that so that there's enough time for Q&A, which means I'm going to be a pain in the neck and just keep pushing you. Okay. Remember, just build on the one that you chose as your priority in the previous exercise.
Yes. So how might we? And then we can come up with solutions to that to answer that question. Yeah, just one how might we based on remember, it's not to be perfect, it's to just learn the methodology. We've got about 2 minutes left. Again, I'm going to be the pain in the neck here. So, one, how might we question after you've prioritized the solution? One minute.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to ask you to stop here just in the interest of time. This is usually when the best ideas get going is when you stop, right? So we apologize for that, but we want to keep you on track. Anybody want to share? Anybody want to lead with their question? Karan?
Thank you. Great, thank you.
Megan? Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. We're not going to score it or grade it, so everybody's a winner here. But we did want to see if you had any questions before we finished up. And just before we do that, we wanted to mention to you, we're very committed to this and excited about it. If anybody else wants to talk to us, anybody learn about it, we'll even do a workshop if that would be helpful. Casey's volunteered to be the point person, so please email Casey and we'll be happy to share. We're going to send you in follow-up some additional materials, our reports that we had and a couple of other things so you can at least see the output of that. But don't hesitate to ask us for insight.